Hey guys, Takamasak here. Welcome back to Book Chat. I wanted to talk a bit about The Awakened Mage. I just finished that book. Thankfully, I have the rest of the week off. Um, I had a lot more hopes for it. I didn't mention it in um, the Innocent Mage at the end of the book. I wanted to leave out the spoilers for that book. So at the end of the book, it leaves a cliffhanger where this evil Morg comes back through. Durham uses this magic to go outside of Barl's wall, and he's possessed. I can't even remember if I talked about this, but he comes back. Somehow Morg comes with him, uh, possesses him, and is able to uh, peruse around. I think that's a word. Kind of wander around inside of Durham, but Durham has no power over him. But he talks and looks like Durham, obviously. Um, at the end of the book, he the royal family goes out on a carriage ride. It was Prince Gar, Princess Fane, Kingborn, and the Queen, whose name escapes me for the time being. But he does something to the horses, and they go off to this place to have a picnic, and the horses go crazy, and they just keep running and running and just run straight off a cliff. Kills the queen, kills the king, kills Princess Fane, who is supposed to be the next weather worker. Gar who is completely magicless, survives. Morg throws him with magic. He freezes time, throws the prince with magic out of the carriage. Prince goes flying, tumbles, he's unconscious for several days. Apparently, Morg doesn't have enough foresight to somehow protect himself. So he's just, oh, okay, everything's fine. The horses are crazy. The prince is out of the carriage. We're careening towards a cliff. And, okay, time on. He goes, horses go flying. Somehow Morg gets thrown out of the carriage, rolls, smashes his head on something, um, ends up in basically in Pother like the doctor of the time, like the medieval doctors, all he's got is potions and the Doranen's slight healing magics that he has. So this is my biggest probably complaint about the book. Morg is completely out of commission for like the first like 15 or 16 out of the 36 chapters. He is stuck inside of Durham because Durham's body is just completely mangled, and he's just being kept alive by Morg's willpower to uh, keep him there and existing, because for some reason he can't leave Durham, but he came into him because he was conscious, like something. I'm not sure if it mentioned anything about it. I don't think it really clarified clearly, but for some reason Morg cannot leave Durham, and if Durham dies, Morg dies. So he's just okay. Getting over that. So all that's going on. Daphne ends up falling in love with Asher, and they develop a relationship. Him and Gar get along for a little while, but then a lot of stuff goes down. Asher finally gets his weatherworking magic, or just magic in general, but the prince. I should backtrack a little bit. There was a parade for some reason. I think it was because of Asher saving Gar when they were off doing something in one of the harbor towns. Like he saved them from drowning after a big storm or something like that. So they had a parade. This was after, I believe, after everybody recovered, right? Or maybe it was before. But somehow Durham gets this ball of magic into Gar's head and allows Gar to kind of take over the throne, because now he's got magic, and he can do the weatherworking now, and that, like I said in the first book, somehow maintains this wall that locks away the outside world. Nothing can get in, preferably not Morgan, who is already in at this point. So Gar kind of takes over for a while, and eventually his magic starts fading because it's on a timer. All this time, I believe, yeah, Morg is still inside of Derm. So I can't remember where exactly Morg threw the power into Gar, but anyway, he did. And I can't remember how it was introduced that Asher has magic. Obviously, Asher was, they built it up, him having magic through the whole first book. And all the way through, or halfway through the second book, it's just getting to him being the mage. So the awakened mage takes all of the innocent mage and half of the awakened mage for the main character to realize, oh, he's got magic. He really didn't want to do any of the weatherworking, but Gar somehow convinced him into doing it. Um, so the reason Asher is so anti-magic and doesn't want anything to do with it, I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the first one, but there are what's referred to as Barl's laws. And the first Barl's law of Barl is any Olkin who is caught even attempting to use magic will be pretty much killed. He'll get a trial, maybe, and just off with his head. So Asher reluctantly takes this up, and at some point, oh boy, there were a couple of visits with Derm in the infirmary, I'll just call it, for lack of anything better to call it. The first one was by Gar, who is desperate. He's lost his magic. He doesn't know what to do. He ends up hearing about this thing that Pother Nix has where it can wake him up, but it's probably not going to help anything. So it's probably going to be bad for him, and he'll most likely end up dying. And Gar's desperate, gets this potion made by Nix. Nix comes over, feeds it to Derm / Morg. No, Morg has left at this point. That was the other meeting. So Derm wakes up. He is himself, more or less, still dying. He doesn't have Morg inside of him at this point to keep him alive long enough. So he wakes up. He doesn't say anything about Morg whatsoever. He just, find the diary! And Gar's supposed to know where this stupid book is. And Derm, while he was still Derm, hid it inside of a book to hide it from, I think, King Born at the time, or anybody else who was going to snoop around his quarters, or whatever you want to call it, and find this thing. So that's pretty much all he says. Nothing about the impending danger, just find the diary, which ends up being helpful. The other meeting with Derm is when he was still possessed. Geralt, who, if I didn't mention in the first review, he is kind of like the super cocky, confident, wants to be, pretty much is next in line, like he thinks his family is the next rightful heir to the throne, were something to happen to the current family, which is just about wiped out at this point. So he goes and consults with, or just goes over to Derm for whatever reason, and somehow Morg manages to break free. I think, like, God, how did that happen? Like, Geralt touched him or something like that, and that was enough to give Morg a link to leave Derm's body and then go into Geralt, who is more like the perfect vessel to be possessed. And things just happened from there. Asher was caught using weather magic because he's on pretty much constant surveillance from Willa, who used to be Gar's assistant's, or Gar's, yeah, I guess you could call him his assistant. The assistant of his assistant. He's kind of like the little piss of the book. You're not supposed to like this one. Miller does a pretty good job of making him very not likable. But yeah, Asher's pretty much under surveillance from Geralt / Morg for the back 10-15 chapters of the book. He finds Willa, finds Asher just after he performs some weather magic. Things hit the fan very quickly. The new king, Geralt, because at this point Gar was blackmailed by Morg, saying if he tries to save Asher or doesn't condemn him, he will just go and start murdering all the Ulkin just because he can, and they're not magical, so he doesn't care. He's just gonna go murder everybody. So Gar's like, well, I made a promise to Asher, but the life of one doesn't outweigh the life of many, so ends up more or less kind of betraying Asher, but not really. Asher is arrested, pretty much no trial. A lot of his former Doran and friends turn on him. Even some of his Ulcan friends, like the guard, the captain uh, he was friends with, turns on him, assumes he's guilty because nobody else knows, or nobody knows it's Morg at this point still. Um, there's, I'll just skip ahead to where there's an execution. Morg is really excited for some reason because I don't know if like he believes in this prophecy or why he was so excited to get Asher out of the way. He was really afraid of him for some reason. I mean, like not super afraid of him because he knows he's stronger, but he still refers to him as like, oh, he's just an Ulkin. But oh, man, I'm just trying to like wrap my head around it all. Um, so skip forward. Asher's about to be beheaded without a trial. Um, it's in this very public square, tons of people at night. The only thing that's lighting the area is this glim fire, which the Dornan use to just conjure up, and it's basically like torches. There is this people who believe in this prophecy about the innocent mage being the one to save them all from a catastrophe. They they happen to have this guy who looks just like Asher, save a few subtle differences, which I thought was really stupid. I think they could have handled that better. They end up traveling all the way from this black woods where their hideout is. They come all the way to Dorana City. They end up they must get like a seat in the front row because I just there are so many people that want to see Asher dead for breaking this law, and they blame him for things that are going on. Everybody wants to see him dead. So I just picture the square like 30 people deep in every direction. Somehow, in the span of like, I think the book said 1 or 2 minutes, all of the glim fire goes out. There's somehow like an explosion and like a little fire on the place where Asher's going to be executed. In that time, they have time to switch Asher out with this body double. The body double had previously drank a potion that killed him, and he didn't feel anything because an explosion like blew him apart. The only thing that was left, I believe the book said, was like somewhere from his shoulder to like his wrist. So that was the only identifying marker. Um, Somehow they get Asher, who has just had the living piss beat out of him for the last few days. Pretty much nothing to eat, nothing to drink. They get him through this huge crowd and manage to get him all the way back into the forest where they tell him. Daphne tells him that he is the innocent mage. She's been hiding it from him. They've been married. Daphne is now pregnant. Asher does not know. The pregnancy has really nothing to do with anything. I don't know why they included it. Nice thought, I suppose. Um, really no bearing on anything other than I guess you're supposed to feel, I don't know, more connected to the characters or something like that. Um, so yeah, Asher's super pissed off, rightfully so. He feels like he doesn't really know Daphne, and doesn't know Matt, and doesn't know this other Vera lady who actually he just met then. Eventually, they get him to come around. They study these spells, really offensive magics that is in Barl's diary. He goes back to Dorana City in this gargantuan storm. A lot of people know that it's Morg now. Morg is just killing people. Like a lot of the former, God, I can't think of, like the former council went up to them and confronted him, and he just murders all 4 or 5 people that went there. He Willa ends up coming up to him, talking, trying to talk some sense into him. Morg reveals himself to Willa, drops him off a balcony. Willa's dead, thankfully. Then it comes up to where there's a battle scene finally at the very tail end of the book, somewhere in the mid 30s chapters, I think. So there's a few demons and stuff that are summoned by Morg, and a few other monsters that are summoned by Asher, and they kind of kill each other. Vera dies, the guard captain dies, Palin Oric, that's his name. Those two end up dying. There's a demon that I thought this was kind of cool, even though it's a little gruesome. It grabs Matt and starts like ripping off his limbs and ends up killing him. He ended up saving Daphne from that demon, and Asher gets really pissed off and just summons all these monsters, and the monsters clear out the demons. Their Morg was coming for something. Asher hit him with like this big fireball. He goes flying into a building to the floor and is pretty much unconscious from that point. Um, it's worth mentioning that somehow Geralt was still in Morg's brain at this point, and he was like seizing up in the air or something like that previously. So I assumed Geralt did more than the book led on, or you're supposed to just use your imagination, I suppose. Asher goes over there, stabs him in the heart, twists it, thinks it's all done. The blade eventually comes out of Geralt's body. The wound seals. He's still really weak. Gar and Asher are still really not on talking terms at this point. Gar calls him over and explains to Asher that, oh, this undoing spell, which will kill him indefinitely, no more immortality for him. You were supposed to use this on him, but now somehow the guy who has no magical ability, I'll give him credit for being a scholar, but I'm not really buying the whole thing that he could change a spell so that, okay, but now this spell has to be channeled through me, and that way I will most likely die instead of you dying. So that's how it ended up going. Asher grabbed onto his shoulder, channels this spell, shoots it at Morg. Morg just disintegrates. Um, it was really kind of a lackluster battle scene. It was a lot of build up for something that was kind of disappointing overall. I mean, like, once it got to that point, I'm like, all right, stuff's finally going to go down. We don't have to wait anymore. I don't have to listen to the characters argue, which is, it's honestly kind of nice to hear best friends not get along and tell each other to piss off. Um, Refreshing. But just not enough happened. I was really disappointed that, like I said earlier in this review, really disappointed that Morg didn't have more of an active role, and he just seems so stupid. He ended up getting himself almost killed in the carriage ride. He merges with Geralt and can't handle that. This is an evil mage who's been alive for 6 centuries, but somehow can't figure out some of these things are going to happen to him. I don't know if just being out of the population has messed with him. Um, that was kind of another thing. There was supposedly like, I don't know how big this land is supposed to be, but Dorna City or Dorna and all of these other areas in Lure are like sealed off. So I assume it's a huge continent. When when Durham went out beyond the wall, he saw like a lot of demons, a lot of death and destruction. But after the wall comes down, there like nothing comes in other than what Morg has summoned. So I was kind of disappointed about that. It did make a mention that Morg tried to reach out to his powers, but I think that was where Geralt kind of put the brakes on Morg. He wasn't able to call his full power to him. At least that's what I assume the book was reaching for. Geralt kind of stopped that. But, okay, I think this review has gone on long enough. A little disappointment. It's not a terrible book. I think the Goodreads score was 3.7 out of 5. I didn't read too many reviews on this book. If I start a series, I have to end a series. This is only a duology instead of a trilogy or anything. Duology? Duology? Do whatever. Um, so yeah, that's just my overall impression of the Awakened Mage. Not bad. There's still a lot of drama. It takes things a while to get going. Unfortunately, I really wanted to see. I would have loved to see a trilogy where Morg just has a lot of power and just I don't know. I think that would have been overall padded too. But that's my overall opinion of the Awakened Mage. Should you read it? If you read the first one and liked the first one, yes. If you read the first one and thought, you might want to stay away from the second one. It's pretty much more of the same drama with a little bit of action thrown at the end. So there you have that. I don't have an idea of what book I'm going to get into next. Probably won't even know till after the weekend. So that's my opinion of the Awakened Mage. This is Takamasak, and I'll see you later.